For about 40 years, one of Athearn's popular models was their DD40 diesel, which was based on plans to a prototype which was never actually produced, but it was close enough to the DD35 that they kept going with it. When these were in production, these were affordable models. You could get them for a very reasonable price, all the way up to the 2000s when they finally went out of production. So while I was looking through my parts, I realized I had a couple of DD40 trucks that were unused. They came from another project which is no longer running, so I cleaned them up and got them ready here. And then I decided to look around and see just what it would cost to put one together instead of buying a whole unit. So I ended up finding a brand new shell with the original detail set. And I found a good chassis, which I cleaned up and gave a fresh coat of paint. And then on top of that, I have the rewound motor from the last video. So, all this together, I only paid about $40, at least up front for what you see on the table. I think I might have paid about $15 for these trucks a long time ago, $10 or $15. But even so, that's still only about a under $60 total that I've spent here, which is still a little less than what the retail price would have been if they were available right now. So let's see about putting this together into a nice running model. So as I've looked through old photos and other material, I found that for the single motor models, they usually put the motor up front, or probably always put it up front. So I'll just push that into place here. These pads are originals from an old Athearn model, and yet they're somehow still flexible and usable. Got that popped in there. Looks good. I don't see anything out of place underneath either. Better make sure that's getting power through the chassis though. So I'll just hook that up real quick and hook this up to one of these truck bosses. So one of these truck pins underneath here. Let's see if that goes. Okay, so the motor is making good contact with the chassis. I don't know if this was true of all Athearn DD40s, but I think at least early on they actually mounted a sort of pillow shaft block right here where you can see this hole. On the later ones, I think they might have just run a really long universal all the way to the truck. But since I'm using an old motor and what looks like an older chassis, I decided to go ahead and make my own little pillow block out of brass here. I just have a piece of tubing soldered in place to act as a bearing. That should work fine. That is tapped for a 256 screw, which I have right here, but not too tight yet. I want to make sure that it's straight with the shaft going through it, which I have actually made right here. I just used a piece of brass tubing and then a universal that came from another engine. It was just in my parts box. So I'll slip this into here, turn that back over. Yeah, it looks like I got that well aligned with the motor. So snap that on. So that's now connected. Now I want to make sure that this is going to allow the universal to turn freely. The easiest way to tell if this is going to work right is to power up the motor, and then I can move that around a little bit while it's running. I'll watch my ammeter on my power supply up there. That'll let me know when it's at its best location. Right now it is not. I think what I need to do is bend this down just slightly. slightly more. Okay, that's looking good. And to make sure that won't be causing a bunch of noise and wearing out, add some oil in there. And that's much better. Okay, that's ready to run. Now that that's in place, I also need to fit a universal coupling to the end of it. Let's see, this one should work. Just another old Athearn coupling that came from something. So next up, install the trucks. And I've already cleaned these up and given them a tuning. Very standard for Athearn trucks. Just the usual geared axles in there. Clean them up. Make sure everything's turning freely. Give them some oil and grease. Nothing real fancy. Then got these old style worm covers here, or worm holders. Snap in place. Also work as the truck retainers. These are a little more sloppy than what Athearn would use later on, but the DD40 always had these through its whole life. It never got the benefits of the upgraded designs that most of their other models did. Now I just need a universal that's going to be a good length. Yeah, I think this one will work. It's a shorter one. This into here. Yeah, this will be perfect. Let's see how this one works. Got to make sure this truck is delivering power to the motor, which I'm sure it will be. Yep, looks good. It also seems to be turning smoothly. That's good. Now the front truck. Same thing. Stick this around inside. Gotta get that angled in there just right. This front one is a little more tricky for some reason. It's a really tight space. There it goes. For this one, I've got another short coupling, but I think this one's too short. This one is too long, but I think this will be the best one to use. So what I'm going to do, all right, now just kind of holding this in place, I'll make it slightly shorter. That'll make it easier to snap things on there, but it'll still have enough length to work. One of the nice things about these old style Athearn shafts is that it's really easy to adjust the length when you need. So they're good for projects like this, even if they're a little more sloppy than some other options. And now to see how both trucks are running, I'll just place this piece of track on the table. Still don't have right rail pickup wired in yet, so I'll connect that there. That one I'll connect to the track though, the negative. And it starts right up. And this motor that I rewound has more than enough power to slip the wheels. So that means it'll have no problem pulling a load. one thing that I do not have is the contact strip. So what I'm going to do instead is use some regular wire. Let's see, I've got this long piece here. I think that'll do the job. I should invest in some wire strippers sometime. This works, being careful. But wire strippers really are so much more convenient. That way you don't risk cutting through the wire. Tin that. Now for the last project that used these trucks, I did have wire soldered on, and that's what these copper pads are for. I clear coated over this, so I'll just burn that away a little. Okay, so now the wire, just put that on there. Okay. Now get a bit of solder onto the motor. I'll put it right here so that it's further away from the plastic. And of course that left a decent amount of flux behind, so I'll just brush that off. That looks better. Pretty good. So, snap the shell on. I don't have a light for it. I may add one in later, but for now, I just want a running model. Looks good. Yeah, that's looking really good. And that's not even using 1/4 of an amp running free there. Very good for an Athearn DD40. That motor rewind from the last video really helped a lot there. So now that I know I have a running model, it's time to get out the detail kit. So I've got the 2 handrail wires here. These are made of steel, and they've seen some age. There's plenty of oxidation, even a bit of rust around them, so I'll want to clean those up first. And as for the detail bag, I actually haven't even opened this up. Well, I guess I did open it up to at least see if the stanchions were there. I don't remember if the rest of the parts are or not. Hopefully they are. And it looks like they are. Good. Okay. Headlight and backup light lenses. And of course I'll have to take the body back off to install those. Horn hook couplers, coupler cover. Because of the project I used these trucks in last time, there's actually no more coupler pocket on the front truck, but I do at least have the one on the rear, so this can pull. I'll probably just leave the front coupler off unless I can find a way to chassis mount it. I'll figure that out some other time. All right, and for these parts, it's kind of the same thing. Made of steel. Actually, these are kind of a blackened steel, it looks like. So you can see that these are blackened. That seems to give them some resistance to oxidation. Okay. I might not have to give these the cleaning I thought after all. Well, this one's a bit rusty. I'll do a little cleaning here and there. Also, one thing I noticed, since these are older ones, later on, Athearn would always bend these into the little eyelets, but on their older models, maybe going up sometime in the early, possibly mid-70s, you had to bend these over the wire yourself. This is actually the first time I've assembled a kit that has these new in the package, so we'll see how that goes. One thing I've found about painting over steel parts that are rusty is that the rust can prevent the paint from sticking properly. It may eventually even bubble up and peel off. So I want to get rid of that rust, and to do that I'm going to try out something I haven't used before. It's called Evapo-Rust. This was recommended to me a while ago for cleaning up rusty stuff. So I've got a little hole poked in the top there. I'll just dump some of that into this plastic container. Now these parts, just dump them inside. And they say to leave that in there for 1 to 12 hours, depending on how much rust there is. And since this is just simple surface rust on a treated blackened surface, I don't think it'll take more than the minimum hour. Now, as for these longer railings here, I can't really fit them into a small container like that. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to put just a little bit of this onto a paper towel. Let's see what happens if I just do this. Well, it seems to be cleaning it off pretty quickly, I'd say. So I'll just continue like this until the rust is cleaned off. And this stuff is water soluble, so you only have to rinse it and then dry the parts out real quick to prevent them from re-rusting. So I'll work on that and then get to assembly. Alright, so the stanchions are now clean of rust and ready to use. And so funny thing, after I put them into the dish with the de-rusting stuff, I ended up forgetting about the project for about a week while I worked on some other things, and it actually went so far as to take off the black oxide coating that was on there. So now it's just a clean, bare steel. Now to actually install these, after testing a couple, I found that they actually have a little bit of a loose fit, so I can just kind of gently push them into there. I'm going to start by putting all the stanchions in place, and then I'll put the wire railing in place and bend those over so that they have a nice tight fit. And since they actually have a looser fit to the shell, that'll allow me to take them back off afterwards for easier painting. So I'll just keep on going with this. And there are quite a few to place, so this is going to take me a little while. Okay, all the stanchions are in place, and I've started the railing into its hole there on the ladder, so I'll just bring that around, kind of trying to fit it underneath at first here, get it under all those stanchions. This will take a little bit of work. All right, I have that in place now, so next thing is to bend these down gently, if I can. I might actually have to do this off camera. This is a little too hard to look at while I have the camera here. Okay, so there's one bent into position so far. Has a good tight fit. And this is pretty tedious to work on, so I'm definitely glad that Athearn started pre-bending those after just a couple years, because this is going to take a lot of work to get all these just right. Okay, now I think I'm getting the hang of this. So I'm kind of holding the railing up there with my nail while I start this with the pliers. Just real gently squeeze right here. Okay, now it's starting to bend. And here. And one more time this way and give it a hard squeeze. And now that has a tight fit. Okay, that's one handrail assembled. So now I'm just gonna gently remove this from the shell until I'm ready to paint it. Get that in first. And sometimes, no matter how careful you are, something's gonna go wrong. Like this back handrail here. It seems like the steel was hardened a little too much, but it wasn't bent quite into shape properly, so when I tried to tighten up the bends a little bit to fit better, it just started snapping. So I'll have to remake that part from some brass wire. But the rest seems to be coming together pretty well. I've got the front ones done, left side. All that's left is the right side railing and then remaking that back one. Oh, and the front railing, it was actually bent incorrectly at the front. It was at a 90-degree angle from what it was supposed to be, so I had to really carefully redo that. And part of it also broke off, but I think I can still use it. Now to paint the railings, since the stanchions, even though I've tightened them on there, they can still kind of move around, like you can see there. What I'm doing is I'm starting by just painting the ends of the handrails, places where I wouldn't be able to reach when they're installed on the model. And then I'll put the handrails back on, only partially painted. And while they're in place, I should be able to flip these up, paint around the backs of them, put them back in place, and then finish the rest. This method seems to be working out. This way I can completely paint the backs of the stanchions without the risk of accidentally painting other parts of the shell. I just have to flip these back a little bit. There it goes. And then brush the paint on. And as the paint dries, I just flip them around, put them back in place. And then paint the front of it, or I guess the outside of it. The handrails are looking good so far, but they are just a bit too shiny, so I'm brushing on some dull coat to help look better on the rest of the model. With the handrails in place, the only detail left is the headlight lenses. Now before I put those in, I did find on the first one in back that I actually had to drill these out very gently, just slightly, because the holes are a little bit filled in with paint and I wasn't able to get the lenses in there without doing this first. You do have to be gentle though, because the paint is a little bit brittle. If you're too rough, it'll flake off. And I did actually have to end up touching up the outside just a little bit. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I should have just put a touch of liquid plastic glue into the holes inside, and that would have softened things up and made it a lot easier to put these in. But anyway, now these are able to go in, and it should look just fine when it's done. To remake that broken rear handrail, I'll be using this 0.025-inch music wire from K&S. Music wire is made from steel, but it's bendable, so it's pretty nice stuff to work with. Very tough. Just have to cut it out of there. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get this stuff out of the vacuum packaging, but once you can get it started, there it goes. And I have the pieces of the original handrail left, so all I have to do is bend that to copy the railing. And to bend music wire, it's just like bending any other type of wire really. Get it in the pliers there, starting with the end of it. Hold that tight, give it a good hard bend. That looks pretty good. If it's not quite a 90-degree angle, you can grab onto it with just a little bit of space between the bend and the pliers, and then push down a little more. And now it's a good 90 degrees. And good as new. You'd never even know it's a handmade replacement. With the body details done, all that's left is just a couple things to do for the chassis. I don't have the original headlight bracket that goes on here, but I do want to have a headlight in the same place as was originally. So I just have this generic light bulb here. I've soldered a thick brass wire to it, as well as this other wire. And I'm just gonna solder this onto the motor, and that'll act as the support instead of that metal strip that they had in there originally. Alright, so I've got that there. Just gonna move that into place a little bit. And that should be about right. And I already put a little bit of solder onto the brass support here. So I'm just gonna bend that 90 degrees or so. Solder this in place real quick. And now the headlight's on there. And that looks good. Not directional, just a regular light bulb. That's how Athearn did it, so that's how I'm doing it. The only other thing the chassis needs is a coupler, so I'll just stick a good old number 5 in there. Snap on the coupler cover. Okay, looks like that's kind of springing back and forth. Something's getting caught. Okay, the spring just got squished a little bit while I was putting the coupler in there. I handled it a bit wrong, I guess, but that's straightened out. Now the coupler is working. And now with all the details done, all I have to do is snap the shell onto the chassis. Just gently go back and forth a bit like that. One latch at a time. It's the easiest way to do this one. This one. And if this still had its front coupler pocket, then that would be the last thing you do here. Just stick the coupler in, snap it on. But besides the missing front coupler, this model is now done and ready to go.